Picture a city that feeds the entire world. Ships come into its docks every morning from the Caribbean, from the East Indies, from the American colonies, from the Baltic and the Mediterranean, and places so far away that half the sailors who leave for them don't come back. They carry sugar and spices and tea and coffee and rum and silks and cotton and every kind of luxurious, beautiful, expensive thing that human beings have learned to want. Now picture a street 6 minutes walk from those docks. A court, really. Not even a street. A narrow passage between two buildings barely wide enough for two people to pass without touching. The walls are black with soot and slick with moisture that never quite dries. There's a central drain down the middle that doesn't drain. The smell coming up from it is the smell of everything the human body doesn't want anymore, combined with the smell of the dead cat that fell in 3 weeks ago, and that nobody has retrieved because who is going to reach their arm into that? There are 12 families living in this court. Some of them have a whole room. Some of them share a room with another family. 2 families are living in the cellar, which floods when it rains and which stays damp even when it hasn't rained for 2 weeks. These people are not starving. Not technically. Not today. But tonight. In the room you share with your mother and your 2 sisters and the old man called Thomas who sleeps in the corner and pays 4p a week for the privilege, there is this for supper, a heel of bread, some dripping, a cup of water each, and if your mother managed to sell enough mended stockings today, maybe a herring. That's it. That is the actual documented, historically accurate supper of a poor family in London, England, in the year 1751. And London in 1751 is supposedly the greatest city in the world. I'm Henry. This is Henry's History for Sleep, and tonight we're not going to look at the grand buildings or the coffee houses or the merchants in their silk coats. Tonight we're going to look at something most historians skip over, because it's not glamorous and there are no famous names attached to it. We're going to look at what poor people actually ate, not what they were supposed to eat, not what moralists said they should eat, not what the cookbooks of the period described, what they actually ate, day by day, meal by meal, the cost of it in pennies, because pennies were what mattered, the taste of it, the texture of it, the smell of it, cooking in a room with no chimney worth speaking of, using fuel you couldn't really afford. We're living it. 1 week, 1 family, get comfortable. Close your eyes. Here we go. Your name is Ned Briggs. You're 16 years old. You were born in this city, which makes you unusual. Most people in London were born somewhere else. They came here from the countryside, from Wales, from Ireland, from Scotland, from places so small and so poor that even London looked like opportunity. You were born here and you've never left, and London is all you know. The smell of coal smoke and river mud, the sound of church bells layered over each other across the whole city, each one on a slightly different schedule. The way the fog comes in off the Thames in autumn and turns everything to grey nothing, so that the buildings across the street disappear and you could be anywhere or nowhere. You live in St. Giles. If you know anything about Georgian London, you know St. Giles. 7 Dials is nearby. The Rookery is nearby. This is not a good neighbourhood. This is not a neighbourhood anyone comes to by choice. This is where London puts the people it doesn't know what to do with. The Irish labouring families, the free black men and women who arrived from the colonies with nothing and found London not particularly interested in giving them something. The criminals and the destitute and the people who were perfectly decent and hard-working and still couldn't quite make their way above the waterline. You live here. Your mother, Joan Briggs, widow of Thomas Briggs, deceased of fever 4 years past, lives here. She takes in mending. She washes clothes for a woman on Great Russell Street when there is washing to be done. She works. She works constantly. She works more hours in a day than the merchants at the Royal Exchange, and she makes less in a week than they make in 20 minutes. Your sisters, Bess, who is 11, and little Anne, who is 7, live here too. And Thomas, in the corner. Old Thomas. You don't know his actual name. You've always called him Thomas because that's what your mother called him. He might be 60. He might be 80. It's impossible to tell because poverty ages people in ways that make guessing meaningless. He used to be a porter. He carried loads for people. His back gave out 5 years ago. Now he sits in the corner and mends things your mother can't face mending, and he pays his 4p a week, and once in a while he has a shilling he won't explain the origin of. The room is this, roughly 15 feet by 12 feet. One window facing the court. The glass in the lower pane is cracked and has been stuffed with a piece of sacking that keeps out most of the wind but none of the smell. In winter, the frost gets in through the gap anyway and leaves ice on the inside of the sill. A fireplace. Small. The chimney draws badly and fills the room with smoke when the wind is wrong, which is most of the time. Fuel costs money you don't always have, so the fire is often cold. A table, 2 stools, a straw mattress that your mother and sisters share, another mattress in the corner for Thomas, a pallet on the floor near the door, which is yours, and which is close enough to the door that the cold comes under it and finds you, no matter how tightly you curl. On the table right now, a cup, cracked, a wooden bowl, a knife, a piece of tallow candle, about a quarter left, a folded piece of cloth that is your mother's mending, a small brown crock that contains salt, if there's any left. On the shelf above the fireplace, a tin pot, a small wooden box where the money goes, another crock, this one for dripping, a piece of hard cheese the size of your fist, though it's getting smaller, a string of onions, 3 left, a paper twist of salt, and a single dried herring hanging from a nail which is there for emergencies and has been there for 2 weeks, and which you're trying very hard not to think about. This is your larder, this is your kitchen, this is your dining room and your bedroom and your sitting room and your workshop, all in one space that would be considered a small storage room in the house, on Great Russell Street, where your mother goes to do the washing. It is Sunday evening. Your mother is tired. She is always tired. But Sunday tired is a specific kind of tired. The kind that comes from a full week of work and the knowledge that tomorrow begins another full week of work, with no variation, no holiday, no end in sight. She's sitting on the stool nearest the fireplace, her hands still. They're rarely still. When they're still, it means she's past the point of being able to push through. Her hands are remarkable things, not in a beautiful way, in the way that hands that have worked every day since childhood become remarkable. The skin on her palms is thick and ridged. The knuckles are red and swollen on the cold days. The fingertips are calloused in specific places from the needle and the mangle and the washboard. There are old burns on the back of her right hand from an incident 3 years ago that she doesn't talk about. She can feel the quality of fabric just by touch. She can tell by the weight of a stocking whether it's worth mending or past it. Her hands know things her eyes don't need to confirm. Right now they're resting in her lap, and she's looking at the fire, and you're not sure if she's thinking or if her mind has simply gone quiet for a few minutes. "Ned," she says, "Ma, did you get anything at the market?" "You did." You'll tell her about it. But first, let me explain what a poor family in Georgian London actually eats, because the answer is stranger and more complicated and more desperate and occasionally more interesting than you might think. Here is a list of things that a poor London family in 1751 might eat in the course of a week. Bread. This is the foundation, the cornerstone, the thing everything else is built around. Oatmeal porridge sometimes, peas porridge sometimes, dripping. The fat left over from cooking meat, or bought cheaply from cookshops that collect it. It goes on bread instead of butter, which costs more than dripping and is therefore a luxury. Herrings. Salt herrings mainly. Dried and salted so they keep. Cheap, filling enough. Extremely salty, which makes you thirsty, which is a problem when water costs effort to fetch. Offal. Liver, kidneys, hearts, lungs. The parts of animals that the people who could afford better parts didn't want. Cheap. Nutritious, actually, though nobody in 1751 knows the word nutritious in the way we mean it. They just know that liver fills you up and keeps you going in a way that plain bread doesn't. Onions. Potatoes, increasingly, though many people still distrust the potato as foreign and strange. Turnips. Cabbage when it's cheap, and that is more or less it. What you don't eat, if you're poor in Georgian London, fresh meat, unless you're lucky or it's a special occasion. Butter. Real butter. The butter in the market is mostly adulterated with lard and chalk and other things the cellars would prefer you didn't investigate. Fresh vegetables in the winter. Fresh anything in the winter. Sugar. Or only the cheapest, darkest muscovado, scraped from the bottom of the barrel. Tea. Well, actually tea is interesting. Tea has become so embedded in the daily life of even very poor people that they drink it despite the cost, watered down and rebrewed until it's barely more than brownish water. Moralists complain about this constantly. How the poor spend money on tea that they should spend on bread. The poor drink tea anyway. When your life is cold and hard and your room is dark and damp, the warmth of a cup of tea is not a luxury. It's the thing that makes the morning bearable. Coffee is too expensive. Beer is cheaper than water in some cases, and beer is safer than water in most cases because the brewing process kills things in the water that would otherwise kill you. Small beer, weak beer, the kind with very low alcohol, is what most people drink all day, including children. And gin, we'll get to gin. But let's start at the beginning of the week. Let's start on Sunday. Sunday is the day you might have meat. Might. The word is doing a lot of work there. Your mother spent most of last week taking in 2 extra loads of mending from a woman called Mrs. Hartley, who lives on the other side of the parish, and who has a husband who tears through shirts at a rate that suggests he either works very hard or fights constantly. The extra mending brought in an extra 6pence, a whole 6pence, which is not nothing. 6pence is 2 days of food for your family if you're careful. Your mother decided that 1 penny of that 6pence would go towards Sunday dinner. 1 penny. Think about what you can buy with 1 penny in 1751. Not much meat, not fresh meat. But from the butcher at the bottom of the court, a man named Walker, who is not above selling things that are slightly past their best to people who can't afford to be particular. 1 penny buys you this, a piece of ox cheek. If you've never cooked ox cheek, the important thing to know is that it is in fact the cheek of an ox, the facial muscle, a cut of meat so unfashionable, so far removed from anything a person of means would consider eating, that Walker practically gives it away. The bones are in it, there's cartilage, there's a great deal of connective tissue that turns, with very long slow cooking into something almost gelatinous and rich. Almost is another word doing heavy lifting here. Your mother has been saving potato peelings and onion skins and the outside leaves of a cabbage she got for a farthing from the market yesterday. These go into the pot with the ox cheek and enough water to cover everything, and the pot goes on the fire and it stays there for the entire morning. The smell is remarkable, genuinely remarkable. Not in the way you might smell a roast coming from a wealthy household, the deep golden smell of rendered fat and caramelized meat. The kind of smell that hits you in the street outside and makes you stop walking for a second. It's not that, but it's warm, and it's animal, and it fills the room with something that isn't smoke or damp or the smell from the court below. Bess has woken up early to tend the fire. She's 11 and she knows exactly how much coal to put on to keep the pot going without burning through the fuel too fast. She's been doing this since she was 8. She sits on the stool with her knees pulled up to her chest and watches the fire like she's having a conversation with it. Anne is still asleep. Old Thomas is sitting up on his mattress, his back against the wall, doing what Thomas does most mornings, which is slowly and methodically crack his knuckles one by one, working from the right little finger to the left thumb, a process that takes about 4 minutes and produces sounds like small green twigs snapping. You're awake. You've been awake for an hour, lying on your pallet, not wanting to get up because the room is cold and your blanket is thin but warm enough if you don't move. Here's what you're thinking about. You're thinking about the heel of bread from yesterday evening, and whether there's enough left for this morning, and whether it's going to be one of those Sundays where you eat the good dinner at noon, and then nothing else until tomorrow because the dinner ate up all the food money. There's probably enough bread for this morning. Probably. Your mother made it stretch yesterday by cutting very thin slices, which she does with a speed and precision that you've never managed to replicate. When you cut bread, it comes out in thick, uneven hunks. When she cuts it, it comes out in slices so thin you can almost see through them. She calls it making it go further. You call it still being hungry. The water in the basin on the floor is cold. The fire's been going long enough to take the worst of the chill off the room, but not long enough to warm it properly. You splash your face, gasp at the temperature, and dry your hands on the front of your shirt. The bread is a round loaf, or what remains of it. Dark, dense. This is not the white wheaten bread you've seen in better houses. This is the bread made from the cheapest flour. Rye mixed in, sometimes bean flour, sometimes things you'd rather not identify. It's heavy and it fills you up and it doesn't go stale as fast as white bread, which is the most important thing. Your mother cuts 4 slices, thin ones, 1 for each of you. There's dripping in the crock, beef dripping mostly with a bit of mutton fat mixed in, left over from 2 different cook shops' discards. It goes on the bread with a knife, a thin scrape, not thick like butter, just enough to give the bread some fat and some flavour, to stop it tasting like eating a damp wall. You eat standing up. There are only 2 stools and one of them is by the fire and is Bess's job right now. Anne sits on the edge of the mattress. Your mother eats while she checks the pot, lifting the lid, letting out a cloud of steam, putting it back. The bread is gone in about 4 bites each. You are not full. You're not empty either. There's a point in between, a kind of provisional state that you know well, where your body's not protesting but also not satisfied, where you exist in a state of waiting for the next thing. Good? Your mother asks. Good, you say. She nods. There's a ritual quality to this exchange. Good means, I acknowledge this food. Good means, I know you're doing your best. good means we are a family that says thank you, even when there isn't much to thank. The ox cheek comes out of the pot around noon. By then, the smell has been building for 3 hours, and it has done something interesting to the room. It's warmer, not just from the fire. The cooking itself has added moisture and warmth, turned the air from sharp and cold to something softer. The windows are fogged. The walls near the fireplace have a slight sheen. Your mother lifts out the meat with a wooden spoon and sets it on the only plate you own, which is a thick piece of cheap earthenware the colour of mud chipped on one side. The broth stays in the pot. The vegetables, potato peelings, onion skins, the cabbage leaves, have dissolved almost entirely into the liquid. The ox cheek has done what ox cheek does when you cook it long enough. The tough fibres have given up their resistance. The cartilage has melted into the surrounding meat. The whole thing pulls apart with not much force into chunks and shreds and pieces of bone that are easy to navigate around. One piece each, a small piece each. Your mother gives herself the smallest. You don't say anything about this. You've been watching her do it for years. The smallest portion, the thinnest slice, the last of whatever's in the pot. She does it automatically, without appearing to make a calculation, but you've made the calculation for her, and you know exactly what she's doing. It's good, you tell her. It is. It genuinely is. Not because ox cheek is delicious, though it has its qualities, a deep mineral richness that straight boiled beef doesn't have, but because it's hot and it's real, and it has the flavour of something that used to be alive. That distinction matters more than you'd expect. Most of what you eat doesn't have that quality. Bread doesn't. Porridge doesn't. Dripping doesn't. Dried. Herring doesn't. Hot fresh meat, even cheap hot fresh meat, is a different experience entirely. Bess is eating with great concentration, methodically separating meat from bone with her fingers, making sure she gets every possible piece. Anne is just eating, the way 7-year-olds eat when they're hungry and the food is warm, completely, unself-consciously, already nearly done before you've had 3 bites. Thomas eats with a kind of grateful solemnity. He says nothing, but at the end he nods in a way that means something. He was a porter for 30 years. He's eaten in every kind of circumstance. He knows what it costs to put meat on the table. The broth is passed around in the single cup, 2 swallows each. It's dark and slightly oily, and tastes of onion and bone and the ghost of the meat. It's the best part, honestly. The fat floats on top in small circles. You drink it and feel it hit your stomach with a warmth that's different from water, substantive, almost thick. That's Sunday dinner, 1 plate of meat, 5 people, about 20 minutes of eating. Then it's over, and the pot is scraped, and the broth cup is rinsed, and the fire is banked down to save the fuel, and Sunday afternoon settles into the room like the dust that falls from the ceiling whenever someone on the floor above walks past. Your mother picks up the mending. Old Thomas goes back to cracking his knuckles and then, later, to the piece of sacking he's been slowly unravelling and reweaving into something. You're not sure what. His fingers work automatically, like they're not attached to him, like they've got their own memory. Bess gets Anne to sleep, because Anne goes to sleep in the afternoons, because Anne is 7 and because being slightly underfed makes you sleepy in the way that being properly fed doesn't. You go out. You go out because the room is too small for 5 people to all be in it on a Sunday afternoon with nothing in particular to do, and because there is a thing you want to check at the market, even though the market is not really what it is on weekdays. Let me explain about the markets. London in 1751 has more markets than you could visit in a single day. Smithfield for meat, Billingsgate for fish, Covent Garden for vegetables and fruit and flowers, Borough Market across the river, Clare Market nearer to you, which does a general trade in everything and which operates out of a collection of sheds and open yards that the smell of Smithfield blows into on most days. On Sunday, the formal markets are closed, or mostly closed, because Sunday is the Lord's Day and commerce is technically at rest. But here's a thing about poverty and commerce. They don't observe the Lord's Day. What actually happens on Sunday, in the courts and alleys around the closed market buildings, is this. The poorest traders set up on the ground, on the pavement, with whatever they have spread on a cloth or in a basket or simply in their hands. Women with 2 or 3 bunches of wilting greens they didn't sell on Saturday. Men with a handful of second-quality onions. Someone selling bread that didn't get sold at the baker's and is now a day old and being moved on at reduced price before it goes completely hard. The authorities occasionally try to stop this. It's illegal trading on a Sunday. It's ignoring the Sabbath. Mostly they don't bother, because the people running these street markets are not doing it for profit. They're doing it because it's their only day to shift goods that will be unsaleable by tomorrow, and because the people buying from them are doing it because it's their only chance to find prices low enough to be within reach. You walk through it now, the light is going already. Winter afternoons in London, the darkness comes early and hard, squeezing the daylight down to a few pale hours. By 3 o'clock the lamplighters should be out, though the lamplighters don't always come through this part of the parish, because this part of the parish is not the priority of the parish, because nothing about this part of the parish is ever anyone's priority. The air smells like it always smells here. Coal smoke from 1,000 small fires, the particular wet brick smell of old buildings that never fully dry, the distant whiff of the river, and underneath all of it, the smell of the market. Cabbage leaves trampled underfoot, something that was once fish, the sharp ammonia smell of a horse that used this stretch of pavement this morning. A woman is selling onions. You stop. How much? She holds up 3 fingers, 3 for a farthing. These are small onions, soft in places, the kind that have been sitting too long, but they're not rotten. You could take the bad spots off and use the rest. You have a farthing. You buy 3 onions. You feel the weight of them in your pocket, small and smooth and slightly waxy under the papery skin. The smell of them rises faintly through the cloth, green and sharp. You keep walking. A man is selling bread. Old bread. The kind that when you tap it makes a sound like knocking on wood. But bread. You've eaten bread harder than this. You've soaked bread this hard in water or in the pot broth and eaten it that way. And it worked. You have another farthing. You hesitate. The thing about the bread in Georgian London is that you need to know something about it before you decide to buy it. Most bread at the cheaper end is adulterated. Not a little, not accidentally, systematically, deliberately, as a matter of commercial practice. The bakers, the legal, legitimate, guild-registered bakers, who are supposed to be operating under the assize of bread, which is a set of laws going back centuries dictating what bread must contain and how it must be priced. Even they are adding things they shouldn't. Chalk, actual chalk, ground fine and white, added to the flour to make it look whiter and go further. Chalk doesn't digest. It just passes through you, doing nothing. You're paying for flour and getting a mixture of flour and chalk and getting nothing out of the chalk but the feeling of being full for slightly longer than you actually are. Alum. This is added to bleach the bread white, because white bread looks more expensive, looks more refined, and people will pay more for white bread even when they can't really afford it. Alum is a mineral compound. In small amounts, it's not going to kill you immediately. In large amounts, over time, it's doing things to your digestion that nobody in 1751 has the science to identify, but that you feel in the sense that your stomach hurts in ways that feel specific, not like hunger, more like the food itself is arguing with you. Bean flour and potato flour increasingly, because they're cheaper than wheat. These aren't necessarily harmful, they just make the bread heavier and denser and less pleasant to eat. Though for a family that needs filling up, heavier and denser is not entirely unwelcome. Water, extra water worked into the dough so the loaf is heavier, and you're paying for water at the price of flour. The loaf looks the same size, it weighs the same. But when it dries out, which it does quickly, it shrinks and becomes even harder than bread usually does. The man selling this bread on Sunday afternoon, on the pavement in the court near Clare Market, almost certainly got it from a baker who didn't sell it during the week. The baker sold it to him for a fraction of its price, because selling it for a fraction is better than throwing it out. The man marks it up slightly, and here he is. You buy a loaf. It cost a halfpenny. For a halfpenny, you get a loaf the size of both your fists together, heavy, dense, quite hard. When you press it, it gives slightly in the middle where it's still a little soft, and the sound it makes is like pressing a slightly damp boot. You carry it home under your arm. Monday is the day your mother goes to Great Russell Street. She leaves before you're properly awake. In the grey pre-dawn of a London winter morning, when the frost hasn't quite made up its mind, she wraps herself in the shawl that has been repaired so many times it's more repair than original, takes the small bundle of her working things, a piece of soap, a cloth for her hands, and disappears down the stairs and into the court. You hear her footsteps, the creak of the third step, which has always creaked and always will, the sound of the street door. Silence. Monday is the worst day for food. Not because there's less food on Monday than other days, the same amount of food or thereabouts, but Monday's the washing day, and washing day means your mother is away from the room from before dawn until past midday, and she does the cooking. And when she's not here, the cooking mostly doesn't happen. You make a cold breakfast. The bread from yesterday cut into chunks. You don't have your mother's thin slice precision, so you cut chunks and feel slightly guilty about it, and make them as small as you can bear. A scrape of dripping, cold water from the basin. Bess eats sitting on the floor. Anne sits on the mattress and eats with the focused attention of a child who knows that this is all there is this morning and there won't be more for a while. You eat standing by the window, watching the court below through the fogged glass. The court is already in motion. This time of the morning, this neighbourhood, almost everyone is already awake. Poverty doesn't sleep late. There's a woman in the court below filling a pail from the water pump at the end of the alley. Mrs. Reardon, who has 4 children and a husband who works as a night soil man, which means he empties privies in the dark hours, which means he smells of what that work involves, and which is why they live in the court next door rather than in the shared house with the other families. She fills the pail, hoists it with both hands, the weight of it pulling her arms long, and walks back to her door without spilling a drop. The pump. You need to get water this morning. In a house on Great Russell Street, in the kind of house where your mother goes to do the washing, water comes through a pipe. Not always, not reliably, not in great quantity, but it comes through a pipe. You turn a tap, You have water. Here, you carry water. The pump at the end of the alley is a parish pump. It serves everyone in this court and the two adjacent ones, which is roughly 40 to 50 families depending on how you count. The water comes from a well dug into the ground somewhere beneath the city, and what that well is adjacent to, what might be seeping into it from the surrounding soil and rock, is something you're better off not knowing. You know anyway. You've lived here your whole life. You know what the ground in this neighbourhood contains. You know where the privies are. You know where the drainage from the dyer's workshop 2 streets over goes. You know that in summer the water from this pump smells slightly different from winter water, and that people get sick in summer in ways they don't quite as much in winter, and that this is connected, but nobody can explain exactly how. You go to the pump. You wait behind an old man you don't know, who fills a bucket with the slow, methodical patience of someone who has stood at this pump 10,000 times and is not going to be hurried by the cold or by anything else. He fills his bucket. He walks away. You fill your bucket. The water comes out cold and dark and with a faint smell you've long since stopped noticing consciously, the way you've stopped noticing the smell of the court or the smell of the room. It splashes over your hand. Your fingers go from cold to numb in about 30 seconds. You carry the bucket back up the stairs, sloshing it slightly at the corner where the passage bends. Some water on the floor. You mop it with your boot. You put the bucket down, flex your fingers to bring them back. The morning stretches out. Old Thomas is awake. He hasn't gone out. Thomas doesn't go out much anymore. His back makes the stairs difficult, and the cold makes the back worse. He sits in his corner with his piece of sacking and his methodical hands and occasionally speaks, and when he speaks it's usually worth listening to. "Your mother taken the good soap?" he asks. "She needs it." There's a bit of the yellow soap left in the cloth, in the box. You find it. A stub of yellow soap, hard and slightly rancid smelling. Yellow soap is cheaper than white soap, made with tallow and lye and not much else, sold by weight at the chandler's or the market. It's what you wash with when you wash. The white soap your mother takes to Great Russell Street is for the linen, for the shirts and sheets and tablecloths of people whose clothes are worth washing carefully. You use the yellow soap on your face and hands and feel the coldness of the water and the grease of the soap and the roughness of your skin all at once. A kind of full-body awareness that comes with winter mornings. The skin on your knuckles is cracked. It's been cracked since October. It heals a little in summer and cracks again in autumn, reliably every year in the same places, and the cracks sting when the soap gets into them and heal over slightly during the day and crack again the next morning. This is your life. Here is what your family spent last week on food. Sunday, 1 penny for ox cheek, half a farthing for the cabbage bits. Call it 1 penny and a half. Saturday, a penny, halfpenny on bread, a farthing on salt herrings. You can get 3 small herrings for a farthing if you're buying the ones at the bottom of the barrel. 2 farthings on oatmeal. Friday, bread, herring, 1 onion, a piece of suet from the butcher that cost a farthing, and went into the oatmeal to give it some fat and some flavour. Thursday, bread, dripping, oatmeal porridge with no additions. A cup of weak tea for your mother because she'd been on her feet since before dawn, and the tea was the thing that kept her going. Wednesday, bread, liver from Walker the butcher, a piece of ox liver the size of your palm costing 3 farthings. Onions fried in the pan with the liver, This was the best meal of the week before Sunday. Tuesday, bread, dripping, peas porridge. Peas soaked overnight and boiled for 2 hours with an onion. Filling, very filling. The kind of filling that sits in your stomach like a stone and lasts for a long time, which is the point. Monday last week, bread, cold bread, dripping. For your mother, nothing until she came back from Great Russell Street at midday and ate the last of the peas porridge cold. Total spent on food last week, approximately 4 pence and 3 farthings. Your mother earns roughly 8 pence to a shilling a week from the mending on a good week. The washing at Great Russell Street brings another 3 pence or 4 pence, also on a good week. The rent for the room is 8 pence a week. Thomas's 4 pence contribution goes toward the rent. That leaves her with somewhere between 4 and 8 pence for everything else. Everything meaning food, coal, soap, candles, the thread she needs for the mending, the occasional replacement of something worn beyond repair. There is no margin. There is absolutely no margin. A bad week. A week when the Great Russell Street household goes to the country and doesn't need the washing done. A week when she gets sick and can't mend. A week when Anne's shoes finally fall apart and the cobbler has to be paid somehow. A bad week means not eating properly. It means eating less. It means making choices that aren't really choices, that are more like choosing which wall to run into. This is not unusual. This is not extreme poverty by the standards of Georgian London. This is normal poverty. This is the ordinary condition of maybe a third of the city's population. There are people worse off than this, families with no room at all, who sleep in shared spaces, who eat less reliably, who have no Thomas in the corner with his 4 pence. There are people who have entirely given up on the idea of regular meals and exist on whatever they can get when they can get it. Your family is not that. Your family is a family that plans, that rations, that knows how to make a halfpenny's worth of oatmeal last 3 days and how to make a farthing's worth of dried peas feel like a proper meal, and how to use the water the vegetables were boiled in as the basis for the next thing so nothing is wasted. Your mother is a genius, actually. You don't think of it in those terms because she's your mother and she's always done this, and you don't have a comparison point that makes you see it clearly. But she is. The skill involved in feeding 5 people on 4 or 5 pence a week in London in 1751 is not a small skill. It requires knowledge of prices and markets and the seasonal availability of different foods. It requires understanding of cooking techniques, what can be done with a cold hearth, what needs hours of slow heat, what can be stretched with water. It requires the willingness to make decisions you don't want to make and to make them without showing the children that they're difficult decisions. She makes it look normal. It is not normal. Tuesday morning, the routine, oatmeal porridge. You soaked the oats last night in the pot with water. This is important. If you don't soak oats, they take much longer to cook, which means more fuel to cook them, which means more money spent on coal. Soaked overnight, they need maybe 20 minutes on the fire. You light the fire. This takes longer than it should because the flint and steel are not cooperating this morning, and your fingers are cold, and the tinder is slightly damp from the humidity in the room, and you strike the flint 6 times before you get a spark that catches, and then you hold the tinder to it with the careful steadiness of someone who knows that if this goes out they'll have to start again. It catches. Small orange flame. You feed it with a twist of paper, then a few sticks of wood, then carefully, a piece of coal the size of your fist. The coal in your scuttle is mostly coal dust and small fragments, the cheapest kind, bought from the coal cellar at the end of the street who sells it in penny lots and is not above mixing in ash and slate when he thinks he can get away with it. The dust doesn't hold heat as well as proper lumps. It burns faster. You have to adjust. The pot goes on. You stir the oats, which have absorbed most of the water overnight and are thick and slightly grey-looking, and smell of something slightly fermented, a gentle sourness that will cook out mostly but not entirely. Your mother is already mending by the window. She works in the best light she can get, which this morning is the thin winter light coming through the fogged glass. Sewing fine stitches in failing light ruins your eyes over years. Your mother's eyes have a slight squint that wasn't there when you were small. You've noticed it increasing. You don't mention this. The porridge thickens. You stir it to stop it sticking to the bottom of the pot, because if it sticks, it burns and burnt. Porridge is one of the more specific miseries of a cold morning. The smell changes as it heats, becoming richer, more grain-like, the fermented undertone burning off. There is no sugar for the porridge. Sugar costs money. There is no milk. Milk in London is a complicated story. Let me tell you about milk in London. There are milk sellers who walk the streets of London with their pails, selling milk door to door. There are dairy farms on the edges of the city, and in the city itself. Cows actually kept in backyards and basements in some parts of London, especially the wealthier parts, so that wealthy families can have fresh milk without worrying about what might have happened to it between the farm and the door. What happens to milk between the farm and the door in London in 1751 is many things, and very few of them are good. The milk sellers dilute it. Everyone knows this. Water is added to increase the volume. The water is from whatever source was convenient, which may or may not be clean, which may or may not have things growing in it that will cause problems. Some of the milk has been standing for hours before it reaches you. In summer, milk standing for hours in London heat develops interesting qualities. In winter, it lasts longer, but longer is relative and does not mean safe. The price. A halfpenny for a small jug. Half a penny. For a family that has 4 or 5 pence a week for food, half a penny for milk that might be watered and might be slightly off is not a sensible expenditure. You don't have milk. The porridge comes with salt. A pinch of salt from the crock. This is enough. The oats have their own flavour, neutral and filling, and the salt brings it forward into something that is not delicious, but is warm and thick, and will coat your stomach and carry you through to noon. You dish it out into the bowl in portions, your mother's portion last, yours first, because you are going out today to do the carrying work, which requires energy, which is a calculation your mother makes without saying it. You eat with a wooden spoon. The porridge is hot enough to steam. You blow on each spoonful. The taste is neutral, slightly salty, with the faint sourness of the overnight soak. The texture is thick and slightly lumpy where the oats haven't quite broken down completely, because the fire isn't quite hot enough, because the coal isn't quite good enough. It's fine, it's warm, it's enough. Anne wrinkles her nose. She's been wrinkling her nose at the porridge since she learned to wrinkle her nose at things. Your mother ignores this. You ignore this. Bess says, "Eat it," with the flat authority of an older sister. Anne eats it. Wednesday morning, you go to buy bread. This should be a simple task. It is not a simple task. There are 3 bakers within reasonable walking distance of your court, the one on the main street, which is the largest and which sells to households with a bit more money, so the bread is slightly better but costs slightly more. The one tucked around the corner from the market, which is smaller and scruffier and sells at lower prices, and a woman called Meg who bakes in her cellar and sells from her window on Wednesdays, which is not quite legal but which the authorities have learned to ignore because the bread she makes is cheaper than either of the other options, and the poor of this parish depend on it. Your mother sends you to Meg. You take a penny. Meg's window is in a basement, which means you crouch down slightly to look through it. The smell that comes from below is the right smell. Hot bread, yeast, the warm, fuggy heat of a baking space that's been going all night. Meg herself is a large woman with flour dusted on her forearms up to the elbows and a face that is simultaneously friendly, and making it clear that she has 30 more customers to see today, and no time for extended conversation. "Penny loaf," you say. She reaches behind her and brings up a round loaf, dark, dense, heavier than you'd expect for its size. You look at it. Here's what you know about Meg's bread, which your mother has explained to you over the years, in the way she explains things she's figured out through experience. Meg's bread is not pure wheat flour. It's mostly wheat flour, but there's rye in it. Probably a quarter rye, maybe more. The rye makes it heavier and darker and keeps it from going stale as quickly, which is a genuine advantage. There's also probably some potato flour. In the last year, since the prices went up, there might be bean flour, which is what causes the bread to have a slight chalkiness when it's fresh that disappears when it's a day old. Is there chalk? Maybe. Meg buys her flour already mixed from a flour dealer, and what the flour dealer adds to it is between the flour dealer and God. Meg probably doesn't know for certain what's in her flour. She makes what she can from what she gets. The thing is, this bread will not kill you. This bread will fill you up and keep you going, and if there's chalk in it and alum in it and various other adulterants, the amounts are small enough that their effects are diffuse and long-term, and don't present as "this bread hurt me," but rather as "my digestion has always been slightly unreliable," and "I've always had a bit of a stomach," and "I don't know, I just feel tired a lot." You take the loaf. It's warm. This is the best thing about going to Meg early. The bread is still warm, and warm bread in the hand on a cold morning is one of the genuinely good small things in your life right now. You hold it against your chest as you walk home, feeling the heat of it through your coat, and you are aware that you want to tear into it right here in the street, that the smell of it is making your stomach speak, and that you're not going to do that because the bread is for 5 people, and your mother needs to cut it, and if you pull at it, you'll have to explain a torn loaf, and she'll know exactly what happened. You walk home, you don't stop, you don't look at anyone. Wednesday is liver day. This is your favourite day of the food week, and if you said that out loud to anyone from a different kind of household, they would stare at you, because ox liver on a Wednesday afternoon is not anyone's idea of something to look forward to. But it is yours, and it is genuinely something you look forward to, and here is why. Walker the butcher keeps his offal separate. The cuts that the gentry and the middling sort buy. The roasts, the chops, the joints, those are out front, displayed on the marble slab, ordered by the housekeepers and maids of the better households. Walker is not primarily serving your neighbourhood. He's primarily serving the people on the broader streets, the households with servants who come to market. But Walker is also a practical man, and practical men don't throw away anything that can be sold. The liver and kidneys and lungs and hearts, the pluck, in the butcher's language, the insides of the animal. These come off the carcass when it's dressed. They don't keep as well as the muscle meat. They need to be sold quickly. Walker sells them from a bucket around the side of the shop to people like you who come around the side and ask. A piece of ox liver about the size of your hand, 3 farthings, 3 farthings. You count them out carefully from the cloth your mother gave you. 3 small coins, the smallest denomination in common use, worth 1/4 of a penny each, worn thin from passing through so many hands in this neighbourhood where no coin circulates higher than 2p without being immediately broken into smaller pieces. Walker wraps the liver in a sheet of paper, old paper, the kind that has already been used for something else, printed on one side with something you don't pause to read. The paper goes dark immediately with the moisture from the meat. You carry it home carefully, away from your coat because liver bleeds. Your mother fried the liver in the pan with the onions you bought on Sunday. 2 of those 3 onions, sliced thin, going into the pan with a tiny piece of dripping to get the fat going, then the liver in strips, the heat of the pan sealing the outside while the inside stays just barely pink, and the onions going brown and slightly sweet and collapsing into the fat, and the whole thing filling the room with a smell that is not what anyone would call subtle. Liver smells. It smells animal and iron-rich and specific, a smell that announces itself through the floor to anyone below and through the wall to anyone next door. Mrs. Reardon knocked, the first time your mother cooked liver in this room, asking what you were cooking, and your mother told her, and Mrs. Reardon asked where you got it and how much, and that is how Mrs. Reardon started going to Walker's Bucket on Wednesdays. Liver is nutritious in ways that Georgian people don't have the vocabulary to describe but can feel. The reason you feel better on Wednesdays and Sundays, more energy, clearer head, less of the grey flat tiredness that accumulates through the week, is because these are the days you get iron and protein and fat-soluble vitamins and B12. You don't know any of this. You just know that Wednesday supper leaves you feeling more like a person and less like a piece of furniture. The plate goes around. Each person gets 2 strips of liver and a heap of onion. The bread soaks up the fat and the liver juice from the pan. You eat with your hands mostly, the bread folded around the meat. The liver is slightly chewy and tastes of metal and fat and something deeply animal that you don't have a word for. It's not delicious in the way a roast would be delicious, but it's satisfying in the way that things that your body actually needs are satisfying, a satisfaction that comes from somewhere deeper than taste preference. Your mother eats all of hers tonight. You notice this. It means she was more hungry than usual, which means she's been rationing more than usual, which means something happened this week that she hasn't told you about. You don't ask. You watch, though. Thursday is the day you understand why people drink gin. Thursday is a bad day this week because the coal is running low, and your mother decides to save it, which means the room is cold and there's no cooking, which means cold bread and cold water for the first meal and nothing hot until the evening. Cold bread in a cold room, eaten quickly, your breath showing in the air, your fingers stiff enough that peeling even a small onion to eat raw with the bread takes twice as long as it should. You go out. You go out because staying in a cold room with nothing to do is its own kind of suffering, and because Thomas is filling the silence with the sound of his knuckle cracking, which today you cannot tolerate. The street is wet. Not raining, but the kind of pervasive damp that exists in the space between rain and no rain. The moisture in the air turning everything it touches slightly clammy. Your coat is not waterproof. Nothing you own is waterproof. This coat came from the second-hand market on Monmouth Street. Everything you wear came from Monmouth Street, where the clothes of the dead and the discarded are sold at prices poor people can afford, and its relationship with water is honest and mutual. It absorbs it immediately and holds it. You walk. 3 streets from your court there is a gin shop. It doesn't announce itself with any particular drama. It's a cellar. Steps going down. A sign above, barely legible, that once said something and now mostly says the ghost of something. A candle in the window. The kind of candle that in a proper household would be considered beneath use. The smell coming up from those steps. You know this smell. Everyone in this neighbourhood knows this smell. It's the smell of raw spirits, not the refined smell of the gin you've occasionally encountered in a tavern, but something rougher, something that has more in common with the smell of a chemist's shop than with any drink you'd choose willingly. Juniper, yes, but underneath it the harsh undertone of spirits distilled from grain that wasn't great quality to begin with, and that hasn't been aged or refined. That went from raw material to saleable product in the minimum possible time, because time is money and there is no money. Gin in London in 1751 is barely gin. Some of it is closer to turpentine with juniper flavouring. Some of it is distilled in conditions that would make a doctor weep if they could see them. The gin shops that operate in the cellars of St. Giles are not selling a product that a person drinks for pleasure. They're selling oblivion. A penny buys enough to get you drunk. Not pleasantly drunk, not the warm social blur of ale in a tavern. Actually drunk. The floor-tilting, world-simplifying, pain-erasing drunk of spirits, taken in quantity on an empty or near-empty stomach. The gin acts have been trying to control this for years. There was one in 1736 that made gin legally expensive to sell. The gin shops just went underground. Informers who turned in illegal cellars got beaten or killed. The government backed off. The gin came back. There's a new act in the works, you've heard. They keep trying. They keep mostly failing. The demand is too great, and the suppliers too numerous and too inventive. Why do people drink gin? You're standing outside the shop right now, looking down those steps, and you're thinking about this question. You're cold. You're slightly hungry. The prospect of going back to the cold room is not appealing. A penny's worth of gin would, for several hours, make all of that not matter. It would make the cold not be cold, and the hunger not be hunger, and the endless weight of the week not be a weight. It would make old Thomas's knuckles inaudible. It would make the sound of the rain not be the sound of the rain coming through the gap in the windowsill. It would make the week seem shorter than it is. You understand why people drink gin. You do not drink gin. This is not because you are virtuous. It's partly because your mother would know. Your mother can smell gin at 20 feet. She has a nose trained by years of watching it consume the neighbourhood. And partly because your body, on a near-empty stomach, would simply fall over. You're 16 and you haven't eaten enough this week and you're already slightly dizzy from the cold, but you understand. The woman who emerges from the cellar steps now, wrapping a shawl around herself, her face the particular blank of gin in quantity. Not asleep, but not quite awake. Not quite present in the way people are usually present. You know her. She lives in the court on the other side of the alley. She has 2 children and no husband, and she takes in laundry when she can get the work and drinks when the laundry hasn't come. She doesn't see you. She walks past, not quite in a straight line, and disappears round the corner. The children will be alone in the room. They'll be cold. If she spent a penny on gin, that's a penny that wasn't bread. You walk away. Friday morning, you go to Billingsgate. Billingsgate is the fish market. It's been on the north bank of the Thames near London Bridge since before anyone can remember. Before the Norman conquest, some say. though you don't know enough history to confirm or dispute this. What you know is what it looks like and smells like at 7 in the morning on a cold Friday in November. It smells like fish. More specifically, it smells like fish, plus salt water, plus the river, plus the mud of the Thames at low tide, plus the smoke of the fires. The fishwives keep going at the edges of the market to warm themselves, plus the smell of fish guts on cobblestones that have absorbed the smell of fish guts over centuries until they might as well be made of fish. You can smell Billingsgate from 2 streets away. You can smell Billingsgate from 1 street away in the other direction on a bad wind day. You've smelled it so many times you don't notice it anymore, which is both a mercy and a small tragedy. You're here for herrings. Herrings are the food of the poor. This is not a secret or an exaggeration. Herrings are the most important fish in the diet of London's working poor, and have been for generations, and will be for generations more. They're cheap because they're available in vast quantities. The herring fleets that work the North Sea bring in quantities that would be impressive even by modern standards. They're salt-cured, so they keep. They're small and portable, and you can eat 1 herring and feel like you've eaten something, which is more than you can say for bread alone. The Billingsgate fishwives are their own institution. The term Billingsgate language has been current in London for decades, meaning abusive and extremely colourful speech, because the fishwives of Billingsgate are famous throughout the city for their capacity to verbally destroy anyone who gives them any trouble. They're not to be messed with, not because of any physical threat, but because they will describe you, your family, your personal habits, and your probable eternal destination in language so specific and so creative that it will follow you for months. You approach a barrel. Salt herring, you ask? What else do you think I'm selling? A hat? This is the fishwife called Nan, who you've bought from before. Her face is red from the cold and from years of outdoor work, and she has arms that speak of a lifetime of lifting barrels and crates, and she's selling from a barrel of salt herrings that smell of salt and cold fish, and something slightly beyond that, a whiff of something just approaching the edge of acceptable, that tells you these herrings have been in the barrel a while and are moving toward a place where they need to be sold today. How much for 3? Farthing. They're going off. They're cured. They're supposed to smell like that. Not like that. A pause. Nan looks at you, then at the barrel, making the rapid calculation of whether she can get a farthing for them, or whether she's going to be left with them. Farthing, and I'll wrap them proper, she says. You pay a farthing. She wraps 3 herrings in a piece of cloth, her own cloth, which is an act of generosity she'd deny if you mentioned it, and hands them to you. You carry them home. The herrings are for tonight. They'll be soaked in water this afternoon to draw out some of the salt. They're too salty to eat directly. The curing process concentrates the salt to a level that makes them almost inedible straight. And then your mother will fry them in the pan with the remaining dripping, and they'll fill the room with a smell that is not as good as liver smell, but is not nothing. A hot, fishy animal smell that means food coming. Salt herring on Friday night. With bread. That's Friday. The bad week comes in February. You know it's coming 2 days before it fully arrives. The way you know storms are coming by the colour of the sky and the particular way the cold feels when there's more cold behind it. Your mother comes home on Monday from Great Russell Street with less money than usual. The household has been unwell. The children have some winter illness, and the housekeeper told your mother they won't need the full washing done this week, just the essentials, which means your mother worked half the hours and got paid proportionally less. She says this without much expression. She sits down, takes off the shawl, puts the coins on the table, 3 pennies instead of 4, and the 4th penny was the extra one, the one that made the difference between managing and barely managing. You look at the money on the table, 3 pennies for food this week, plus whatever she earns from mending, which has been slow this week because the weather has kept people inside, and the woman who normally brings her the most work has the same winter illness as the great Russell Street household. 3 pennies, 5 people, 6 days until the next washing day. You watch your mother sit down on the stool and look at the fire. She's not looking at the fire like she's thinking. She's looking at the fire like she needs something to look at that isn't the 3 pennies on the table. Ma. She looks up. Her face is tired in a way that goes beyond the usual tiredness of the end of a working day. This is a different kind of tired, the kind that comes from adding up a sum and always getting less than 0. It's fine, she says. It's not fine. You both know it's not fine. But the word fine is doing work here. It's not a description of the situation. It's a decision about how to approach the situation. Fine means we're not going to panic. Fine means we have been in bad weeks before. Fine means there is a shape to getting through this, and I know the shape. You sit down across from her. Tell me what needs doing, you say. She looks at you for a moment. You're 16. She still sometimes sees a child when she looks at you and has to adjust, but she adjusts. You'll need to go to the parish, she says, in the morning. The parish of St. Giles in the Fields has a system for dealing with its poor. It is not a good system. It is a system that was designed by people who are not poor, to be administered by people who are not poor, to manage people who are poor in ways that would stop them becoming too visible a problem. But it exists. The workhouse on Short's Gardens takes in the absolute destitute, the people with no room, no work, no family, no options. You're not going to the workhouse. Your family is not that desperate. The workhouse is the last resort, the last place, and you know families who have gone in and not come back in any meaningful sense. The workhouse takes people and uses them, sets them to work, feeds them barely enough, keeps them from dying in the street, and demands in return the surrender of whatever independence they had. You're not there yet. What you're going to is the parish relief office. The parish maintains a list of poor families. Your family is on this list. Your mother put you on it after your father died, when it became clear that things were going to be difficult. Being on the list means that in a sufficiently bad week, you can go to the parish office and make a case for temporary relief. The relief, when it comes, is usually in kind. Bread, mainly, a loaf of bread, sometimes 2, occasionally a portion of oatmeal. Once, memorably, a piece of salt beef that turned out to be perfectly edible, and that your mother made last 3 days. The process of getting this relief is its own experience, and it is an experience designed, consciously or not, to be unpleasant enough that people will prefer almost anything to going through it. You arrive at the parish office at 8 in the morning. It's a room in the back of the vestry building which is attached to the church, which is cold in a way that churches and the rooms adjacent to them are cold. Not just cold from winter, but cold from the stone, from the centuries, from the weight of the building itself. There are 5 other people already waiting. A woman with a baby that isn't making noise, which is worrying in its own way. Quiet babies in February are not a good sign. 2 men who look like brothers, both with the particular look of men who've been doing manual work for 20 years and whose bodies are beginning to refuse. a young woman about your mother's age, alone. You take your place. The overseer of the poor arrives at 8:30. He is a man called, improbably, Mr. Sweetly, who is not sweet, and whose name is therefore a source of constant private dark humour in the neighbourhood. Mr. Sweetly is a tradesman of some middling sort. You've never been entirely sure what he trades, who's been appointed overseer by the parish vestry, and who approaches his duties with the combination of bureaucratic precision and genuine disdain for the people he's meant to help that characterises so many people given small authority over desperate people. He looks at you. Briggs. He already knows. He has a list. You are on the list. You are, to him, a line on a list. Yes, sir. Your mother unwell? No, sir. The household she washes for... I heard. Several families reporting reduced work this week. He writes something. You'll be seeing this kind of week every winter. The weather keeps the better households inside and it reduces their requirements. He says this in the tone of someone imparting useful information, as if you don't know this, as if your mother hasn't been navigating this reality since before you were born. Yes, sir. He looks at the list again. At your family. Briggs. Joan. Widow. 4 dependents. The Thomas in the corner doesn't appear on the official list of your family. He's a separate case, or perhaps not listed at all, because Thomas came and went over the years in a way that doesn't fit neatly into the parish's categories. I can authorise 1 loaf, he says. Come back Thursday if the situation continues. 1 loaf. You hold the receipt he gives you and go to the storeroom at the back where a man named Jenkins, who is kinder than Mr. Sweetly without being kind exactly, gives you a loaf of bread from the shelf. The parish bread is different from Meg's bread and different from the baker's bread. It is a plain, honest loaf made from decent flour with no particular adulterants. The parish contracts this bread out and is at least less tolerant of fraud than the open market, and it's heavy and slightly dry from having sat in the storeroom for a day. But it's real bread, and you carry it home under your arm and feel the weight of it, which is good, which means substance, which means days of meals from this 1 loaf if it's carefully managed. Your mother looks up when you come in with it. She doesn't say anything. She takes it, puts it on the table, stands with her hand resting on the top of it for a moment. Then she cuts 4 slices, thin ones, and sets the rest aside. In February the cheapest things are cheaper. This sounds like good news. It's not entirely good news. February is when the market is glutted with things nobody particularly wants. The winter vegetables that have been in storage since autumn are now past their best. The turnips going soft and slightly sweet in a way that suggests the beginning of rot. The cabbages' outer leaves turning translucent. The potatoes developing a particular smell. But they're cheap. You know how to navigate the market in February. Your mother has been teaching you this for years, the way she taught you everything practical, not as a lesson, just as a thing she did with you alongside her. So you absorbed it the way you absorb a language by living in it. Don't buy anything being actively sold loudly. The louder someone is selling something, the more urgently they need to sell it. And that urgency usually means there's a reason for urgency. Buy from the women at the back. The women who have smaller amounts to sell, who set up at the edges of the market with their baskets and their quiet voices. They're often selling things from their own gardens or from kitchen gardens they tend. Things they grew themselves, which means they know the quality exactly. Buy the whole vegetable when you can, not the cut portions. Cut portions are cut because part of the vegetable had to be removed, and the seller is hoping you won't look too closely at the cut end. Smell before you buy. This is the most important rule. Smell everything. Your nose will tell you things your eyes can't see, the faint sweetness of beginning rot, the particular smell of a vegetable that was stored somewhere damp and has been affected by it, the clean smell of something that was grown properly and harvested at the right time and has been kept cool since. You walk through the February market with your 2 farthings. 2 farthings, which is the money your mother has given you for vegetables today, 2 farthings being, after rent and bread, what's left of what she has. And you apply the rules. A woman near the back of the market is selling turnips, 3 for a farthing. You smell them. They smell like turnips should smell, earthy and slightly bitter and cold. You buy 3. Another woman is selling dried peas from a sack. Your farthing buys a cupful, measured in a battered tin cup that she carries specifically for measuring, a cup worn smooth on the inside from years of dried peas running through it. The peas go into the cloth you brought for carrying things. You walk home, the turnips and peas, with water and the remaining onion, and the smallest possible piece of suet your mother has saved for exactly this kind of day, will make a soup that will last 2 days. Not a rich soup, not a flavoursome soup exactly, but a hot soup, filling and warm, that turns the worst of the cold February into something survivable. Thursday evening. Your mother starts the soup at 4, because it needs 3 hours and she wants it ready by 7. The peas go in first, washed and picked over by Bess, who sits at the table and sorts through them with her small, precise fingers, flicking out the split ones and the ones with dark spots. The peas go into the pot with water, enough water to cover them twice over, because they'll absorb a lot of it as they cook. Then the turnips peeled and cut into rough pieces. The chunks are uneven because the knife is not very sharp and the turnips are slightly resistant. The sound of the knife on the wood, thunk, 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 fills the room with a domestic percussion that's oddly comforting. The onion, halved and then quartered, the layers separating as the knife goes through. The piece of suet, about the size of your thumbnail, which will melt into the soup and give it a thin film of fat on the surface, barely visible, but there. Salt. A pinch from the salt crock, held up and released from her fingers, spreading out in the air before it hits the pot. Then the fire. This is the longest burning cook of the week, the one that requires the most coal, and your mother manages it with the same careful precision she applies to everything, adding fuel in small amounts to maintain a steady low simmer rather than a boil, because a boil wastes heat and fuel and can make peas go to mush rather than staying whole. The room warms. This is the thing about cooking in your room that is both practical and something more than practical. The cooking warms the room. The pot on the fire raises the temperature in this 15 by 12 space by several degrees that feel significant when those degrees are the difference between wearing your coat inside and not wearing your coat inside. The steam adds moisture to the air, softens it slightly, makes it less sharp. The smell changes as the cooking progresses. First, just the smell of hot water, slightly mineral, then the smell of the peas beginning to soften, a green-grey smell, earthy and muted. Then the onion releasing into the water, the sharp smell of raw onion mellowing into something sweeter and more diffuse. Then the turnips, adding their bitterness, and the suet melting in, and all of it combining into something that is not exactly a good smell, not in the way the liver was a good smell, but is a solid, warm smell of something that will feed you. Old Thomas sniffs. Peas and turnip, he says. That's right. My mother used to make that. This is one of the longest sentences you've ever heard Thomas say about his life before. You wait to see if more is coming. It is. In Wiltshire, long time ago, with the fat from the pork we kept. He lapses back into silence. His hands continue their work on the sacking. You sit down at the table. Outside, the court is quiet. It's too cold for much street activity. A dog somewhere is barking at something and then stopping and then barking again. The intermittent complaint of a dog with nothing better to do. A child is crying briefly and then stops. You think about the food in this room. You think about it in the specific way that you've learned to think about it. Not as a pleasure or a lack exactly, but as a system. A set of decisions and constraints and adaptations. The puzzle of feeding 5 people on next to nothing week after week, without anyone getting too sick, without the kind of hunger that makes people unable to function, without catastrophic failure. Your mother has been solving this puzzle for your entire life. She solved it when she had more to work with, and she's solving it now with less. She solved it when your father was alive and contributing a labourer's wages, and she's solving it in the years since his death, which removed those wages and added a period of grief and dislocation that she has not, as far as you can tell, ever fully allowed herself. She came out the other side of it harder, not cold, hard in the way that metals are hard, not brittle, not inflexible, but dense, resistant to forces that would reshape them. The soup is ready at 6, a little early, because the fire has been generous tonight and the peas went soft faster than expected. Your mother ladles it out. It's grey-brown and slightly thick with the dissolved pea starch, with turnip pieces soft enough to cut with a spoon, with onion transparent and sweet, with a thin slick of fat on the surface. You eat. It tastes like what it is. Peas and turnip and water and a memory of onion and suet. It's not memorable. It won't be something you think about with longing later in your life. It is exactly sufficient. It is warm and it fills your stomach, and it will be there again tomorrow, slightly thicker from sitting overnight, and the day after that, the peas swelling further into the liquid, the whole thing becoming more dense and more uniform and slightly more flavoursome as the days go by, the way long-sitting soups always improve. Good, says Bess. Good, says Anne. Good, says Thomas from the corner. Your mother says nothing. She eats. Saturday morning is the market sweep. This is not a formal thing. There's no name for it. It's just a practice. You go to the market late on Saturday morning, as close to closing as you can, and you buy the things that the market sellers are trying to move before they shut up their stalls and go home for Sunday. The prices on Saturday afternoon are not like weekday prices. On Saturday afternoon, a cabbage that cost 3 farthings on Tuesday cost a farthing. A bunch of carrots that was 2p is now a halfpenny. Fish that would have been sold at a penny each is being moved at 3 for a halfpenny. The quality reflects this. The cabbage has been sitting out in the cold all week, and its outer leaves are yellowing. The carrots have a softness in places that speaks to improper storage. The fish is not quite fresh, but you've learned to distinguish between not quite fresh and dangerous. This is an important skill. There are people who make themselves sick by buying things that are too far gone. There are also people who are so afraid of making themselves sick that they throw away food that would have been perfectly edible cooked promptly. The line between these categories is something your mother can identify almost entirely by smell. You're learning. The fish. You smell it before you buy. The smell should be of the sea, of salt, of cold water. When it starts smelling of something more complex, something faintly sweet in the wrong way. That's the beginning of the process you don't want. This particular fish, 2 small sprats, smells of the sea and salt and cold water. It smells fine. Halfpenny for 2 sprats, a cabbage outer leaf that a seller gives you for nothing, because she's going to strip the outer leaves off before she takes it home and there's no point wasting them. You take them. They're coarse and slightly tough and they'll need long cooking, but they'll add bulk and colour to something. A turnip. A single large turnip that has a soft spot on one side that you'll cut away for a farthing. You've spent a farthing and a halfpenny, which is what you had, and you're carrying 2 sprats, a handful of cabbage outer leaves, 1 large turnip. This is Saturday's contribution to the larder. Your mother fries the sprats whole, in the pan with a piece of dripping no bigger than a walnut, and the smell that comes off them is the best smell of the week. The sharp, hot, specific smell of fresh small fish frying in fat, browning and crisping at the edges, the skin going golden, the whole fish, head and all, fried crisp enough that you eat it entire, 'cause the bones go soft when it's cooked right, and there's meat and fat and crispness all at once in a small silvery package. Bess eats the head, which she has always maintained is the best part. Your mother eats hers standing at the fire. Thomas gets a whole sprat to himself, which today is the right call because today Thomas has not eaten since yesterday morning, and this is a thing your mother has assessed with the quiet peripheral attention she pays to everyone in the room, always tracking, always calculating. You eat yours in 4 bites, and the taste is briefly, specifically, genuinely good. That good. The kind of good that feels significant. The kind of good that arrives when you've been eating bread and dripping and thin soup for days, and then something with fat and salt and crispness arrives, and your body greets it with something close to joy. Good, you say, meaning something more complete this time. Your mother laughs. Just briefly, just a small sound, but a laugh. Let me tell you something about the food you're not eating. Because here's the thing about London in 1751 that would break your heart if you thought about it too clearly. The food is there. The abundance is real. More food flows through this city than through almost any other city in the world. The river brings in fish from the North Sea every morning. The roads bring in cattle and pigs and sheep from the home counties, driven into Smithfield on foot, sometimes for days, arriving thin and stressed and still valuable. Covent Garden receives vegetables and fruit from market gardens all around the city. The docks bring in sugar and spice and dried fruit and wines and spirits from every corner of the globe. It's there. The food is physically present in your city. What's not present is the connection between the food and the people who can't afford it. 20 minutes walk from your court is the area around St. James's. This is where the wealthy households are. The households with kitchens staffed by actual cooks, actual kitchen maids, actual scullery girls. The households where a dinner for 12 people involves birds and fish and joints of meat, and 2 kinds of soup and dessert and sweet wine, and all of it managed by people who are paid to manage it, and who have access to ingredients you have never touched. The cook in one of those houses goes to Covent Garden every morning, sent by the housekeeper with a basket and a list. She buys fresh herbs. She buys butter, real butter, salted, yellow country butter by the pound. She buys veal and lamb and the best cuts of beef. She buys cream. She buys lemons for the sauce and anchovies for the flavouring and mushroom ketchup from the jar, and spice from the spice merchant. She throws away, at the end of the week, more food than your family eats. Not because she's wasteful particularly, because there's more food in that kitchen than any family, however hungry, can consume, and the excess gets scraped into the slop pail and goes to the pig, or it gets carried out to the back alley where the poor of the parish can find it, sometimes if they know when to look. Your mother knows when to look. She doesn't do it often. Not because of pride. Pride is a luxury, and your mother is not a foolish woman, but because the back alleys of wealthy houses are also where other rougher people look, and competing with them for kitchen scraps is not always safe, not always dignified, not always worth it. But sometimes when things are very tight, she goes. She's never told you this directly. You know it the way you know things about her that she doesn't say, by what's sometimes in the pot on a Thursday night that she won't account for, a piece of something too good for what she could have bought, a flavour that doesn't fit the week's budget. You've never asked. The city holds its food in buildings that gleam and in courts that stink. The same city, the same moment, the sugar merchant's warehouse by the river, full of hogsheads of dark muscovado from the Caribbean, produced by people in slavery on the other side of the world, shipped here for a wealthy city's sweet tooth, and 3 streets back a court where 5 people share one room, and a piece of ox cheek is Sunday's feast. Both of these things are London. Both of them are real. Here's what you know about food that nobody taught you as a lesson. You know that hunger is not one thing, it's a range. At one end is the routine, ordinary, manageable, not quite full that is your daily baseline, the state of having eaten enough to function, but not quite enough to feel satisfied, the state you've existed in for most of your life. This is ordinary, this is expected. You don't think about it any more than you think about breathing. In the middle is the hunger that comes after 2 days of very thin eating, the hunger that settles into your stomach as a specific physical presence, a kind of ache that starts in the belly and radiates out, that makes you think about food constantly, that makes you aware of smells you normally filter out. Walking past a cook shop when you're this kind of hungry is an exercise in discipline, because the smell of the cooking, even cheap cookshop cooking, even the grey boiled meats and thin gravies of the working class cookshops, is overwhelming. It occupies your whole attention. It crowds out other thoughts. At the far end is the hunger you've felt twice in your life. Once when you were 11 and your mother was sick for a full week and couldn't work and couldn't manage the food, and once this past autumn when a week of bad luck piled on bad luck. This hunger is not a feeling exactly. It's closer to a state in which your body is using itself for fuel, your muscles specifically becoming slightly less effective day by day, and in which your thinking changes quality, becomes slower, less precise, more fixed on immediate problems. This hunger makes the world smaller. It reduces everything to the immediate question of the next meal. You know the food prices in Clare Market and Billingsgate, and the Sunday street sales by heart. You know that 3p worth of dried peas, properly managed, feeds your family for 3 days. You know that liver is better for you than bread, in the specific practical sense that the days after liver days you work harder and feel less tired. You know that the bread you eat has things in it that aren't bread, and you eat it anyway because it's what's available and it fills you up and that's what matters. You know that water from the parish pump is not safe, but it's what you have, and you boil it when you can and drink it when you can't. You know that your mother's hands tell the story of the food system you live in more clearly than any book, the calluses from the mending, the burns from the washing copper, the roughness from the cold water, and the lack of any real moisturizing agent available to a woman who can't afford it. You know that Thomas, in his corner, eats less than the rest of you, not because he's not hungry, but because he knows the calculus of the household, and he's decided, with the dignity of an old man who has spent his life doing hard work and is now past it, to take the smallest share. You know that Bess will always eat her bread quickly and then look at the table, not asking for more, but looking, and that you're always aware of this and always calculate whether there is more and always make the decision your mother has already made. And you know this, the thing that keeps this working, the thing that keeps 5 people in one room in a bad neighbourhood, in the hardest city in the world alive and mostly functional, and not entirely broken, is not the food itself, which is often poor quality and often insufficient. It's the managing of it, the system, the attention that your mother pays to it every single day, without rest, without holidays, without days when she can afford not to think about it. She holds all of this in her head simultaneously. What you have, what you need, what things cost, what can be stretched and what can't. Who is more hungry than they're saying? What the week ahead might require, what the week after that might take away. She does this while also mending the stockings and doing the washing and keeping the room as clean as a room in St. Giles can be kept, and raising 3 children and maintaining the appearance, for the children especially, that things are under control and manageable and not desperate. They are desperate. She makes them not look desperate. That is its own kind of genius. You know there are places you can eat without cooking. This is not quite the comfort it sounds like. The cook shops of St. Giles and the surrounding area are the cheapest food establishments in London, catering specifically to people who have no kitchen, or who are in lodgings where cooking isn't possible, or who are working all day and have no time to prepare food. The cook shop near the market sells 3 things reliably: boiled beef with vegetables, which costs 3 halfpence a portion; peas pudding, which is peas boiled into a solid mass and sold by the slice for a halfpenny; and a thing called soup, which is the water the beef was boiled in with some scraps of meat dissolved into it, sold for a farthing a cup. The beef is grey. This is not an insult or an exaggeration. It is boiled beef, and boiled beef is grey. And if you've ever eaten beef that was cooked any other way, you can see what boiling does to the colour. The taste is proportional, all the virtue boiled out of it into the soup water, what remains being the fibre and the protein stripped of the fat that made it palatable. The peas pudding is better. The peas pudding is, actually, something you like. You've liked it since you were small. It's dense and starchy and slightly sweet from the peas, and it holds its heat for a long time, which means when you buy it in cold weather and eat it on the street, it's still warm by the last bite. The taste is neutral and filling and not offensive in any way. The soup is the soup. You drink it when you need something hot in you, and there's no other option. You hold the cup with both hands because the warmth in the cup is almost the point, and you drink it slowly because slow drinking makes it last and makes the warmth last and makes the farthing feel like it bought more than it did. Once a week, sometimes, you buy a cup of cook shop soup, just for yourself. Your mother doesn't know. You use one of the farthings you sometimes earn by running errands for people in the neighbourhood. A halfpenny here, a farthing there, small coins that accumulate slowly and that you don't always put in the family box, not out of greed but out of this. The knowledge that a warm cup of soup on a cold day is a thing you need sometimes, specifically, privately, as a person, and not as a member of a household. You stand outside the cook shop. The steam from the pot inside comes out through the open door into the cold air and curls upward as disappears. You hold the cup. You're 16 years old in London in 1751, and you are cold and slightly hungry, and the city around you is going about its business. The carts on the street, the woman selling watercress from a basket, the sound of hammers from the carpenter's shop on the corner. And for the duration of this cup of soup, you're not managing anything or calculating anything or being anybody's older, brother. You're just warm. This too is what the food is for. Not just fuel, not just survival. This, the 30 seconds of warmth in a cold week that makes the cold week smaller and more bearable and possible to continue through. Your mother is at the window when you get home. She's been mending by the window all afternoon. The light has been going for an hour now, and she's moved the stool as close to the glass as possible to catch the last of it, and now she's shifted to working by the candle, which costs money to burn and which she only uses when she absolutely has to. The candle throws her shadow large on the wall behind her. Her hands move in the circle of light. The needle goes in and comes out. The thread follows. In and out, the repetitive motion that she could do in her sleep and sometimes does, or close to it. You've seen her mending late at night with her eyes half closed, her hands continuing automatically. Bess is asleep on the mattress, curled with Anne. Thomas is asleep in his corner. His snoring is a familiar sound, a low resonant rumble that your brain has long since categorized as background noise, present and ignorable. You sit down at the table. "Did you get anything?" your mother asks, not looking up. "2 herrings for Friday, bread from Meg, 3 onions. She nods. "And the soup?" She knows. Of course she knows. She has always known. She's never said anything about it. You understand now that she has never said anything about it, because she's made a deliberate decision not to, because she knows why you do it, because she knows that a boy of 16 needs something that is his own, even if it's only a farthing's worth of grey soup on a cold street. "The soup," you say. She nods again. The needle continues. "You did well this week," she says, "with Walker. He tried to charge you a halfpenny more for the liver. I said we'd go to the other butcher. We can't actually, Walker's better. He doesn't know that." She almost smiles. You can see it in the corner of her face, in the slight shift around her eyes. "No," she says, "he doesn't." The candle flickers as a draught comes under the door. Your mother shields it with her hand without looking, the way she does a dozen things without looking, by habit and necessity, and the accumulated knowledge of living in this room for 7 years. The fire is low, not out, but low. You put on a piece of coal, the last large piece in the scuttle. The small pieces and the dust can go tomorrow. The heat from the fire reaches you across the room. Not full warmth, not the warmth you'd get standing next to it, but the presence of warmth, the knowledge of it, the way it changes the quality of the air in the room from raw to merely cold. "I was thinking," you say. "About what?" "About the cook shop, about Walker's bucket, about Billingsgate in the morning and Meg's window in the bread-smelling dark, about the 3 onions in your pocket and what they'll become, about the way your mother cuts bread and the way old Thomas eats less than he needs, and the way Anne eats everything put in front of her with 7-year-old completeness, and the way Bess always makes sure the fire is tended, about this system, this careful, precise, relentless system, about what it takes." "Nothing," you say. She nods. She already knew what you were thinking about, probably, or something close enough. The needle goes in, the needle comes out. Here's what a poor family in Georgian London ate in a week. Bread. 4 or 5 loaves, depending on the size and quality available. This is the foundation, always. Bread is 40 to 60% of the calories this family consumes in a week. Without bread, the other food is insufficient. With bread, the other food stretches further and fills the gaps. Oatmeal or peas porridge, twice a week, maybe 3 times. Hot, filling, cheap. The thing that keeps you going through the morning on days when breakfast is the only meal before midday. Dripping. A small crock, replenished weekly from the butcher's discards or the cookshop's overflow, goes on bread, goes into the pot for flavour and fat. The fat is important. Your body in this climate, doing this kind of work, needs fat. Fat keeps you warm. Fat keeps the cold from getting into you the way it otherwise would. Onions, always. Onions are the universal cheap vegetable, available every month of the year, lasting well in storage, adding flavour to things that would be intolerably bland without them. Herrings, 2 or 3 times a week. The protein of the poor, the fish that comes in from the North Sea in such quantities that it's available to people who can't afford almost anything else. Liver or other offal, once a week, sometimes twice. The thing your body actually needs and mostly doesn't get enough of. Turnips, cabbages, carrots, dried peas, as available, as affordable. The bulk of the vegetables, not glamorous, not varied, but present. Occasional cookshop food, when time or circumstance requires. A cup of soup, a slice of peas pudding, the purchased hot meal that stands in for cooking when cooking isn't possible. Tea, weak tea, twice a day, watered down, rebrewed. A penny a week's worth of tea leaves stretched to 3 times their proper yield. Not adequate nutrition, not adequate tea, but warm and familiar, and the thing that marks morning from darkness and makes the start of a difficult day slightly more bearable. What this adds up to, calorically, is this: not quite enough. Consistently, reliably, week after week, not quite enough. Your body is not at the level of acute starvation. You grow, you function, you can work. But you're operating at a slight deficit always, the kind that doesn't present as crisis, but the over years and decades builds up into the specific physical profile of the Georgian poor, smaller than they might have been, with more worn faces at younger ages, with bodies that have worked hard and been fed barely enough, and that show both. What this adds up to, in human terms, is different. It adds up to a family that talks about food the way other families talk about weather, constantly, practically, as the central organising fact of daily life. It adds up to a child who knows the price of oatmeal and the difference between fresh and salt herring, and which butcher sells the best offal and which baker adulterates least. It adds up to a mother whose entire day is organised around the question of what will be eaten and how, and where the money for it will come from. And it adds up to a system, imperfect, improvised, occasionally failing, but a system, a set of solutions to a set of problems. The solutions pass down not through books or lessons, but through daily practice, through watching and doing, through the accumulated knowledge of people who had to figure out how to survive and did. The room is dark now. Your mother has put out the candle. The fire is banked. The room is not warm, but it's not as cold as the street outside, not cold enough to prevent sleep, which is a kind of success. You lie on your pallet near the door. The sounds of the court come up through the window. Someone is arguing somewhere, the argument rising and falling in volume as whoever's arguing moves through the court and away. A dog. the distant sound of a watchman's rattle on a street you can't see, and underneath all of it, the constant low murmur of the city which is never entirely silent, which has sounds even at 3 in the morning on the deepest night of winter, because 500,000 people can't all be quiet at once. You're warm enough. The blanket is thin, and the pallet is hard, and the cold comes under the door and finds your feet, which is a thing you've learned to manage by wearing your stockings to bed, which your mother doesn't know about, and which would make her lecture you about ruining the stockings. But warm enough. You think about the week, the ox cheek on Sunday, the thin bread in the morning every morning, the liver on Wednesday, the best meal, the one you feel in your body for a day afterward, the pea soup in the cold week, the sprats on Saturday, the one good smell of the week, the fat and salt and crisp, the farthing cup of soup. You think about that, the specific warmth of it, the 30 seconds of just being warm, standing on the pavement outside the cook shop, not calculating anything. Something about the city settles at night, not the noise. The noise doesn't settle, not entirely. But the urgency does. The daytime urgency that is everything needing to happen at once. The market and the pump and the errands and the calculations, all of it pressing constantly. It eases, becomes something you can hold at a distance for a few hours. You think about your mother's hands. You think about Thomas, who was a porter and is now a corner, who carried the weight of this city on his back for 30 years and is now carried by a family he pays 4p a week to belong to. You think about Bess tending the fire. You think about Anne eating the porridge she doesn't like every Tuesday without real complaint, because she's learning something that nobody has had to say out loud to her, that you eat what there is. This family, this room, this system of bread and dripping and herrings and the weekly liver and the Sunday meat, small as it is, and the careful management of everything by your mother, who never sleeps enough and whose hands are always doing something, and who sometimes, when she thinks you're asleep, sits by the banked fire in the middle of the night and looks at nothing. You've seen this. You've never said you've seen it. She looks at the fire and she is, you think, doing a kind of counting. Not of coins, though the coins are always being counted. A different counting. Of people, of what they need, of how to get there. She gets there, not elegantly, not with anything to spare, not without cost to herself, which she pays constantly and without apparent awareness that it's a cost. But she gets there. Tomorrow there will be more bread to cut and more water to fetch from the pump, and more coal to ration, and more pennies to stretch further than they should go. That's tomorrow. Right now there's just the dark room and the sounds of the court and the thin warmth of your blanket and the knowledge, which you hold on to like something you won't let go of, that you are warm enough and fed enough and safe enough. That enough. Enough to sleep. The sounds of the city grow softer. Or maybe your ears grow softer. Maybe the tiredness of the week finally reaches deep enough to take the sharpness from things. The fire is just coals now, casting a dim orange light on the ceiling when you open your eyes. When you close them, there's just the warmth of it, a presence in the room, something that is still here, still burning, still doing its job. Your mother is asleep. Her breathing is even and slightly heavier than daytime breathing, the breathing of genuine sleep, not the thin sleep she sometimes does in the chair where she's still listening with some part of herself for the children, for sounds that require attention. Tonight she's actually asleep. Old Thomas is snoring. Bess has an arm thrown over Anne. her smaller shape curled into the larger one the way Anne has always slept beside her, since Anne was born and Bess was 4 and took it upon herself to be Anne's person. The cold comes under the door and finds your feet. Your stockings are on. You pull the blanket up. The porridge will need soaking tonight. You already did it. You've learned to do this automatically, the way you've learned all the things that need doing before sleep can come without guilt. The fire banked, the water bucket filled for morning, the pot with the oats already soaking in it on the floor beside the fireplace, everything in its place, everything that can be managed, the rest, left for morning. Your eyes close properly. Not the half-closed state of lying on the pallet not quite ready to sleep, but the real closing. The kind where the room fades rather than going dark. Somewhere across the city, in a house you'll never see, a cook is probably still up preparing something for tomorrow's table. Something that involves cream and spice and cuts of meat that have names. Something that takes time and skill and ingredients that cost more than your week's food budget. And here in St. Giles, in this court, in this room, 5 people sleep with the specific completeness of people who have worked hard and eaten what there was and made it through another day. Both of these are London. Both of these are true. The city is very large and holds all of this simultaneously. The extravagance and the thrift, the abundance and the scarcity, the grand buildings and the damp rooms, and none of it is far from any other part of it. The distance between the wealthy table and your pallet being perhaps 20 minutes' walk in good weather. But the distance isn't measured in streets. It never is. You sink further. The sounds of the court grow smaller. The arguing has stopped. The dog has stopped. The watchman is somewhere else. There's just the bass note of the city, the thing that's always present under everything, the low breathing of 500,000 lives. You're part of it. One of the 500,000, one of the many who wake early and work hard and eat what they can and sleep in rooms not quite big enough and manage somehow with ingenuity and knowledge and the help of people who do the same beside them. You are warm enough. You've been fed enough. You are safe enough. That's enough. Let it be enough. Let sleep come the way the warmth comes from a pot on the fire, from the outside in, gradually, the edges first and then the middle, until the whole of it is changed. Let the thinking slow. Let the counting stop. Let the bread and the oatmeal and the herrings and the liver and the thin soup and the cup outside the cook shop and the Sunday meat and the farthing vegetables and all of it, let it settle, let it become just what it is, a life lived carefully and not without difficulty and not without warmth in the greatest city in the world. Centuries from now, people will wonder what it was like, what you ate, what it tasted like, what it cost, what it meant to be alive in London in this year, in this room, in this family. They'll find the records, the parish relief lists with your family's name on them, the market price list that tell them what a pound of oatmeal cost and what a salt herring sold for, the moralist pamphlets complaining about gin and adulterated bread, the accounts of cook shops and the bills of fare at establishments where the food you ate was not on the menu. But they won't know this. The 30 seconds of warmth from the soup cup, the smell of the liver frying on Wednesday, the way the fire in the morning changes the quality of the air, the specific pleasure of Anne eating her porridge with complete serious focus, finishing everything, the bowl clean. You know this. You carry it. Let it rest now. Let the night have it for a while. Tomorrow comes when it comes. The bell somewhere will mark the hour. Your stockings are on. The oats are soaking. The blanket is thin but warm enough. Sleep, Ned Briggs. Sleep in London in the year 1751. The city will still be here in the morning. So will you. Good night.